the value of training and teaching in times of AI is really what I find very scary in today's world, is that maybe some of the YouTubers or some of these internet influencers might have. How safe does it feel if you're sharing your progress or your struggles and people are obviously not interested?
Okay, on the show today, someone I like a lot. She is a master facilitator. She's just joined Helen and I on the team for Flourishing Facilitators, which is our new program for facilitators to help their well-being and support their ongoing lifelong learning. Yeah, she has been running a podcast herself for quite a long time. There's well over 100 episodes, and interviewed me a while back, and is very, very competent in that. I don't know what else to say. Myriam, welcome.
Thank you, Mark. So happy to be here.
So, I mean, often we talk about coaching. Well, actually, why don't we start with the difference between coaching and facilitation, and then we'll get into what makes a great facilitator.
Mm.
It seems like, we have often there's a crossover. Often people are facilitating, they're coaching, maybe training. Let's ask the boring question first. So, define terms. What is facilitating compared to training or coaching?
Mm. Um, yeah, good one. I think we're all three use similar tools. So facilitators use coaching tools, asking questions, um, creating an environment where people feel comfortable and safe to open up. Trainers use facilitation techniques. I think the main difference is what is the goal of the session, where for training, the trainer is hired to fill a knowledge gap.
Hmm.
So the participants don't know something the trainer knows, and
Got
that's
it.
the goal of the session. For facilitation, the facilitator comes in to help the group do something together that they wouldn't be able to do alone. So the goal is something outside the participants. It's a shared common purpose. And the facilitator helps with the process and how to get there without teaching or adding any content necessarily. And coaching for me, and I would be curious if you agree, is a more inner journey. So the coach helps someone to achieve or group something, achieve something that is within them. So this is something personal and not a shared purpose. So mindset, um, posture, these kind of things.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. And I so wonder in the world of AI how much the idea of I have something to teach you, I have information to
Mm.
convey to you. I often say I'm just a teacher or I'm a trainer. I often say that. And I'm explicitly not facilitating a lot of the time. And I wonder sort of in the world of AI where kind of information is now worthless, essentially. That
Hmm.
that role has changed in terms of the value of it. Whereas facilitating, it's like that's a skill where you're helping a process along.
Yeah.
And as you
Yeah.
say, you could not know about the topic, right? Like I've facilitated groups of people, managers talking about processes in their company, and I've understood little to nothing about what the content of what they're talking
Yeah.
about, but I help them converse, help them get somewhere. So I
Yeah.
guess there's a difference between those things.
Absolutely. I think and I love that you bring AI in. I think the facilitator trusts that all the knowledge is in the room already, but somehow the people are standing in their own way.
Yeah,
And I think that's also where a lot of your work comes in. It's often stress, it's overwhelm, it's maybe um, conflict.
yeah,
So nervous system overload is in the way to have the conversations they need. And then for AI, I totally agree that now information is basically it's cheap, it's abundant, everyone can get it. So I think the value of training and teaching in times of AI is really facilitative training. So how can
right,
we create an experience for the learner so that they can absorb it and apply it? Because they can watch a YouTube video, they can have a chat with AI and learn more in shorter time. But it's not
right,
the
right.
embodied learning.
Right. I think this one might be more of a conversation than an interview, Miriam, if you're okay with that. I just
Yes,
so that
please.
just because we're both, it's both geeks for this, we're both competent in this area, and
That's more fun.
yeah, it can be for sure. And I go, so I'm not conveying information so much because they can just Google that. But I guess we're looking at this like levels of learning, different ways, experiential learning. and then also the emotional side. So I'm doing a
Mm.
understand, like I just did a live workshop, and some part of me goes, why do people come to live workshops when they can just read my book? It's a lot cheaper, in terms of embodiment. There's probably more information in the book than they'll get in 2 days in a workshop. But they come for the inspiration, they come
Hmm.
for the provocation, they come to be prodded, to be co-regulated, to be
Hmm.
soothed, to be kind of regulated in a state. They come to feel like they belong, that it's
Hmm.
also sort of emotional needs being met,
Yeah.
and an embodied emotional social process which enables a different kind of learning that they'd get just reading a book or looking at a website.
Yeah.
Thoughts
And
on
I
that?
think there's something about learning in community.
Yeah.
So we are in there together.
Yes.
So I think this just opens the mind maybe more because we feel safer. And I think so. I always open my trainings or master classes with the call out. This is not a webinar. If you arrive to take
Right.
to work on your emails or to do some other stuff, you're in the wrong spot because you have to do the work. Um, so I would throw them into breakout rooms. I would be in conversation with them constantly because I think otherwise, yeah, they could watch a YouTube video.
Yeah, I would say on Keck, we have quite a strict standard about this, that they have to have their cameras on.
Mm.
And for example, I've had coaching clients do this as well, turn up in Burger King or something, in Starbucks. And I'm like, no, no, we're going to be moving, we're going to be doing stuff. I need you to be fully present. And we actually say, like, look, you don't pass the course unless you have your camera on. We have, people whose job it is to make sure people are there. We have quite a strict standard for that. And
Yeah.
some of them read the information up front, so they're ready for that. Whereas others is like, oh, I thought I was watching Mark TV. And it's like, no, 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 this is participatory, it's interactive, presence is really important. We do breakout rooms, which and often people say, oh, I didn't feel drained afterwards. And I'm like,
Mm.
yeah, because you were
Yeah.
in a present, interactive. It's not really Zoom fatigue, it's something like passivity
And I
fatigue a lot
think
of the time.
there's, yeah, not, I would say not everyone has the same talent of performing Mark TV as you do, because it is a lot of information that you're sharing with a group. And I've sat in some of your classes, and it is massively entertaining. And I think one thing that might be worth highlighting that participation by the group doesn't have to be that they speak or use the chat, but I
Right.
think just the visual, the body language. Okay, people can nod and people can
Yeah,
laugh
yeah,
and they
yeah.
can interact with you. And then suddenly it becomes a group conversation, even if only one speaks.
We hold up thumbs and thumbs for how your
Yeah,
mood, numbers on fingers, and
yeah.
I'm like, you know what I mean, and like checking in with people all the time. So it's like, even though it's sort of one to many, it's teaching there's that connection there. There's that, as well as breakouts. Here's what's interesting: there's the assumptions people bring. Like assumption could be, I'm a consumer, I've paid my money, I'm just watching
Mm,
TV now. Or another assumption, and this happens in Amsterdam where you are, right? And Berlin happens even more. People think they're in therapy sessions.
mm.
So
Oh, yeah.
they'll it's like I'm in a group therapy session and my job is to share my emotional experience and or cultural. So the Americans will often like in the chat sort of shout out their opinions, for example. And
Mm.
I have to tell them, look, I don't care about your opinions. I'm
The
not
best.
doing that. We're not, no
Yeah.
one, like, no one's here to see your opinions. Thank you. And that's very
Yeah.
different than the sort of facilitation experience where it's like,
Mhm.
okay, people's opinions are really important. And
Yes.
let's
Yes.
gather that, that's very different as a sort of
100%.
teaching versus
Yeah.
facilitation.
And that's why I think the ground rules, the boundaries, the air quotes, I'm using facilitator jargon now, container
Yeah. Yeah. We'll talk about
is
what the
so
container
important.
is in a minute. Yeah.
Um, where, okay, so what's on the label and what do we need to make sure that what's inside the container is um,
Matching.
matching what's on the label? And I think these kind of things, like your opinions, it's great for you to have them, but here's not the space. Your
Oh, your
trauma,
trauma.
I
Yeah.
acknowledge that you have it,
Correct.
but here's not the space. I think it might sound harsh, but it's very important to be upfront with that, and then everyone can deal with it.
All right, it's clear. It's clear what you're buying, and it's then at the beginning of every workshop, like the one I just did in Zagreb. It's like, okay, this is what we're doing, guys. It's not group therapy. if you have an emotion, you will have emotions. It's okay. The tissues are over there. If you cry, it's allowed.
Mm,
And we're not oversharing our trauma. We're not, having lots of space for the kind of personal processing of feelings. It's almost like that's an assumption in certain subcultures now that
mm,
that's what we're doing, right? We're always doing therapy, I think we're in a therapeutic culture, and I know books have been
mm,
written on this. And
mhm,
one thing I'll say, for example, is I'm going to treat you like robust adults.
I love that.
And people often are relieved by that because they know
Yeah.
that there's not one person in the room who can use it as their cheap private therapy group.
Yeah, and you're not their dad.
Right. Like I'm here to teach you. You've come to me because there's something I know. Like that's a teaching framework,
Yeah,
different than a facilitator framework, which is I don't know the topic, right?
yeah.
Or I know a bit about the topic, but actually what's interesting is what you guys have to say and what you're going to do as a group.
And I think that's why in facilitation, um, and then it's a slippery slope, right? Because I think authentic relating is a facilitated process that is very therapeutical. So it's all about the sharing. So when I speak about facilitation, I'm speaking about talk shops. So we talk, it's for
Talk shops.
teams with a shared goal and purpose. It's not the group coaching or therapeutical. I think that's an important distinction. Um,
Uh-huh.
and then not as it's easier not to fall into this group coaching, people oversharing trap
Yeah, and
because
particularly
it's
if it's a business environment, you've been brought in to do a job, like there's an
yeah,
outcome that's needed, that's been decided beforehand. Like this is what I've got a
yeah,
friend who works for a company that does creative breakthroughs, for example, and companies pay them, everyone comes in for a day and they have to come out with like a new product idea or a new service idea. And it's
yeah,
very clear that while emotions come up and there's some sort of therapeutic themes at times or projections or, sort of things happening that are interesting psychologically, they have an outcome that they're all heading
yeah,
for.
yeah. And I think it's now more and more important to be trauma informed in the facilitation, to be aware that people have different experiences, different preferences, and we cannot ask everyone to close their eyes. And we have to be more inclusive in our language in order not to
I like
trigger.
being exclusive. I believe in what's the opposite of diversity, equity, and inclusion? Being divisive, being elitist, and excluding. That's what I believe in a training environment. We may differ here.
I and I think I think that it's important to be exclusive in the invitation.
Okay,
This space is not for everyone,
this is
right?
for this
This is
purpose.
for certain people for around a certain purpose, and there's a reason why some are invited and others are not invited.
Okay.
And within that group, I'm very inclusive because everyone who's there has a right to be there and to show up as they are, and I want them to participate as much as they can.
So
And
this
I
all
think
really
so. I think there's a difference.
yeah, I agree with that. And I'm slightly trolling here. I'm slightly joking.
I know.
You know how to take me by now. And it does get into almost the political. So facilitation in its nature has this sort of almost liberal frame of the answers in the room, original goodness. It's like all the answers are there. It's almost a belief system, right? And I think there's a time and a place for it, just to be clear. I'm not against it. But I think there's almost a political framing. You're Dutch, there's a cultural framing.
And
Like Dutch
Germans.
and Germans, excuse me, Dutch and Germans both like to sort of discuss it. I remember once I was teaching a workshop in Germany, and I was very much like top down, dictatorial, and it was fine. And then I left one of my German colleagues in charge, and I came back. I said, "You just, speak in German for an hour, process what we're doing." And I came back, and everyone was in a circle, and she was facilitating. Everyone was having their say. Everyone was speaking equally. Very democratic. The sort of post-Hitler, anything but Hitler kind of
Mhm,
process. And the atmosphere in the room, the embodiment had changed. And it was
mhm,
beautiful. It was really beautiful, but it was very clear it was a sort of cultural piece. The whole German, everyone has to have their say kind of piece. And I wonder if our politics doesn't sort of influence this in a way, like, or our practices. Like I came from the Japanese martial arts, which is
mm,
very top down,
yeah,
right? And sometimes, like say too much, like you have to, I think they don't question the sensei nearly enough in Aikido. Like it's dangerous how little they question the sensei quite often.
Yeah.
Yeah, any thoughts on that? The sort of cultural or political kind of seeps in, and then we justify it and say, "Oh, this is good facilitation or good trading," but it's
Mm.
really our own bias.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. I think I used to be more extremist in the everyone's opinion counts and everyone has to have a say.
Yeah.
Um, and now I think it depends.
Uh-huh.
Also, not everyone wants to have a say.
Uh-huh.
That's the next
Why?
piece. There are different ways of processing. Um, so it depends what we try to achieve with the group.
Yeah.
Um, but I think, and that leads us to the safety piece. I think I want to create an environment where those who are included, everyone has the impression that they can express what they have to contribute
Yeah.
um, in a way that's constructive and won't be punished. Um,
Uh-huh. Okay,
which
we definitely.
is which is different, and then touching on something that we talked beforehand,
Yeah.
which is different from the entitlement
Yeah.
of I'm here and can express my entire life and will get what I need
Yeah, I'm
to
here to
satisfy my own personal, yeah.
parasitically use the group for my own emotional needs. Okay, so we're going to talk about safety. We said
Hmm.
we talk about this. I think just to set that up, sometimes I see a fundamental, it kind of completes what we're just saying, really, a fundamental confusion between sort of basic dignity of equality
Hmm.
and then actually there's hierarchies of knowledge and hierarchies of role.
Mm.
So,
Hmm.
and I think sometimes that's confused. So it's like
Mm.
the right-wing confusion is that we sort of don't have basic dignity of humanity. We don't have a basic, this is sort of Christian idea actually, which sort of has been recycled into liberalism and wokeism in its most extreme form, is that we're basically all beautiful souls under God and we have a kind of human rights, we'd say in the modern context, we have a unique shared humanity and that
Hmm.
gives a shared dignity.
Hmm.
And then, but there's also, that's not to deny that. There's also the more kind of Greco-Roman idea of there's hierarchy, there's excellence. There's people who just don't know what the fuck they're talking about. Or
Mm.
there's people
Hmm.
who are qualified in a particular area, who have something to say about a topic from their experience or from their expertise. And
Hmm.
I feel like the sort of liberal mistake is to think that that kind of hierarchy doesn't exist.
Mm. Yeah, and
And
that's dangerous
right. And both are
because
dangerous.
then everyone
Both
defines
mistakes.
their own truth. And then someone, just because they know one exception to the rule, believe that
Oh,
they can question the rule, right?
that's the most boring thing in the world, isn't it? When people say, well, actually, if I said generally men are physically stronger than women, but not always,
But
but
I
generally.
know that my neighbor,
Yeah,
she's
yeah.
definitely stronger than you are.
It's such a mid-wit mistake.
Yeah.
I think there's even a name for it now because it's become
Yeah.
such a popular like not understanding averages. Not anyway, that's a
And
separate
so I'm a recovering academic, right? So
covering
I
academic.
did sit through my PhD. And I think what I find very scary in today's world is that knowledge, mastery of knowledge, digging into research, history is not respected um, anymore. And I think that's very dangerous, actually.
Yeah, yeah, this is essentially, again, the over democratization of knowledge. Like everyone's got an opinion, everyone's opinion matters equally when it doesn't. But it's also a battle for authority. So what's currently happening is a
Mm.
war for what. So, for example, every institution is corrupt, but every institution also educates. So, for example, the Catholic Church and Amsterdam University and the BBC, they all have a certain expertise, but they're also all corrupt. So, for
Mm.
example, Oxford University now discriminates against white people and lets people in based on the color of their skin. It's a racist institution, essentially. So, to me, it's lost a lot of its authority. If I see someone with a degree from Oxford, um, I no longer guess that that was an intelligent person and that's how they got in because there's other ways to get in now. And there always was because it was like family connections before, or,
Mm.
you were posh, you're an aristocrat or something, right? So what's going on at the moment is a war for authority. And if people have invested in a PhD or invested in becoming a priest or invested in kissing asses and doing an internship at the BBC, then they're very upset when other people say they're equally qualified. And
Yeah.
both, and there's both points, right? It's like it's not that it means nothing to have had a degree from Harvard or to have worked for the BBC for 10 years, right? But equally, the BBC is corrupt. Harvard is corrupt. So it's a very difficult thing. And now we're rearranging who gets to have knowledge because the
And
internet's totally changed
mhm,
it, right?
absolutely. And you haven't even mentioned the YouTuber having 20 million followers.
Is that an authority nowadays? Is
Definitely
it?
an authority, right? Huge influence. Um, Maybe some of the YouTubers or some of these internet influencers might have as much knowledge and experience, expertise as someone with a PhD, and maybe not. And I think that's the danger. I'm actually writing a book about exactly that.
There's a war going on. Like I literally just saw some academic historians being very upset with a historian YouTuber because he's not an academic. Right.
Mm.
So from their point of view, it's like we spent all this money and we did all this reading in the library, and now you're famous. And it's often resentment driven. That's
Yeah,
often at
yeah.
the root of it is
And that's
resentment.
as dangerous, right? Because especially not just knowledge, as long as it's well researched and it's based on truth. But then what I was missing in all the activism communities, that there is no conversation with a historian, for instance.
Uh-huh.
Right?
Uh-huh. Yeah. So the more
But yeah,
over
that's a
democratic
slippery
ones.
slope. Let's not get
It's
into
a big
politics.
topic. It's a big topic. I find it fascinating. And the last example of this would be someone with a big Instagram following who, we've had people on the podcast who turned out when they came on were not very competent, but they
Mm.
had a big Instagram following. And
Mhm.
my PA was kind of saying, hey, this person should speak about embodiment. And I said, okay, let's give them a chance. They look good. They got good marketing. Their videos are slick. And then we have them on. And after 10 minutes, they have nothing to say
Yeah.
because they
And
don't
that's a
actually
problem with AI, right? You can fake it so easily.
good marketing, good video editor, like it's possible. Okay, let's talk about safety then. So safe spaces, obviously I have an immediate triggering trauma response when I hear the term, ironically.
Yeah.
I often say my trainings are not safe spaces because they're transformative spaces, they're ethical spaces, but not safe spaces. So I think we probably agree more than we might initially think on this. What is a,
100%.
a safe space for you? I mean, is it just somewhere where someone's not going to get offended? Is it somewhere where I have to, my language is going to be policed very heavily? This is what it's come to mean to me. If I see safe space on a workshop, I'm not going,
Yeah.
basically. I
Interesting.
because I go, this is not a place where I can be me. I'm going to be
Mm.
politically indoctrinated. I go, this is an
Mm.
absolute red flag for me. So what is it for you? Because you seem a
For
little
me is
bit different.
Thank you for asking. For me, a safe space is where we can have difficult conversations, ask questions, admit mistakes, um, without the fear of being punished for that or harassed. So for me, it's the opposite of being nice. It's
Okay.
a space where we can be kind to each other. So, for instance, I've been in one of your trainings, and you have given a participant a very direct feedback, that you would like her not to be, not to play childish, something along these
Not to
lines.
what? What was it?
Not to play the child.
Okay. Yeah, they were. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, something along these lines, which sounds horrendous for someone who might now listen to that. Oh, you cannot say that to a participant. But you created a safe space where she could hear that without taking it personally and feeling offended. And for me, that's
So
a
there was
safe
enough
space.
relationship, enough rapport, enough.
Enough respect. And so I base my definition of psychological safety on Timothy Clark. He has a model of 4 stages. And what I love about it, it's basically a function of 2 things: permission and respect. It's
Okay.
respect, what you call human dignity.
Yeah.
Every
Yeah.
human being is worth being respected as a human
Yeah.
being. So
Yeah.
you need that. And then you need permission. If you have only permission without respect, then people become bullies, just lashing out. Oh, I'm allowed to say my opinion.
Yeah.
N-
Yeah.
Stepping on everyone's toes. That's not safe. If you have no permission but only respect, nobody says what they're actually thinking, but everyone has a very high esteem of everyone else.
Okay. Nice.
That's
There's
not
enough
safe either.
balance. of the two things. I think the word I sort of get a bit stuck on the word safe, because
Mm.
it's sort of misused. Often I think it's a misunderstanding of polyvagal theory,
Yes.
essentially.
Mm.
Stephen Porges' work has essentially been misunderstood by a whole generation, because he was talking about the unconscious assessment of that there isn't threat. A-
Oh.
And so the original sense of, fight or flight was threat to life or limb,
Hmm.
because human beings, life, limb, or integrity of self would be the trauma term, right? So like it would include like rape, for example, like violation or
Mm.
imprisonment or something. Um, but then as human beings, we are social animals, and we use that same threat system for more like social threat.
Hmm.
And I think where it gets tricky is there's a cycle, there's a slippery slope here where we start talking about the equivalence of words to actions, like
Mm.
an activist accused me of harm. It's a very
Mm.
vague term, and what they really meant was they were a bit upset by something I put on Facebook.
Yeah.
And but by putting it in the same frame as harm, it takes it into a different legal and moral paradigm. And the same with safety, right? It's a sort of different moral paradigm
Mm.
rather than saying, you know what, I feel a little uncomfortable with this, which is that's the classic now. I feel uncomfortable, which to me is like, okay, sure, you're in a training, of course you do, but
It would be a waste of time and money if they didn't.
right, that's not therefore Americans use it to say they don't want to do something now. It's become a
Mm.
kind of phraseology. Young people in Europe too, like I feel uncomfortable. It's like, okay, like as you say, this is why you're paying to be here, right? There's some degree of discomfort and change. Um, yeah, so in terms of like what is a safe space for me, like ethical space, like there's consent,
Mm.
that there's, as you say, basic respect, human dignity, and permission there. So I guess it's a place where people are more able to have difficult conversations in the
Yeah.
facilitation
So
environment. Like I'm not going to be actively punished seems to be key to your,
yeah,
but I
so you're
will
not going to be laughed at. So if
be like mocked.
so I said in your training, you speak a lot about centering. I've never
Yeah,
done that before. So I am
yeah,
asking you, what do you mean by centering?
yeah.
You won't start laughing at me and saying, "Miriam, you're in my training. You should know what centering is."
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, I'm there to teach people centering, so that would be strange. But I do reserve the right to mock people and for them to mock each other, though. I'm not against mockery. I feel like
Hmm.
mockery and shaming can both be quite useful. I'm not against those. It's just very basic things human beings do. I mean, I
And then
wouldn't
it's
want it to be a humorless environment.
and then okay, now you're speaking about humor. So I think for it's something that you use as a technique to train. It's
Hmm.
provocation.
Yeah, and
But
humor and evocation and inspiration and like a lot of emotional tools. People always remember the provocation because it's less typical, but
exactly.
there's a lot of sweetness and tenderness and other kind of emotional
So and you would not so imagine that you're going to London and in the middle of the or in Amsterdam, you're standing on the Dam. You say,
yeah.
"Hey people, come here, I'm gonna teach you a little bit of embodiment." Right? And then this random crowd of people stands around you, and then you start to mock them and you start to insult them and you start to
Yeah.
tell them that they look childish. You wouldn't do that.
Well, I mean, it's certainly challenging can be part of training. And again, I find places that are saying they're safe space are often a bit humorless.
And I think that's doesn't give what I trying to say with the example of the dumb.
Yeah.
If just any person joins, they don't know. So there's no everyone has permission to be there. So it's very
Mhm.
unclear what do they expect, what is the framework. So it's
It's
difficult.
about the container, right? Like, what are we
Exactly. You don't
aligned
have
with?
the container.
What are the rules? Like at the beginning, we'll say, consent, confidentiality, ground rules for today. Like I'm a big believer in like consent in trainings, opt out in trainings, confidentiality in trainings. But I kind of go for me, this is more like an ethical
Yeah.
container. It's not so
And I think we're
much
just using different
different
words. So
words
for
than
me,
it.
everything that you describe um, makes me say that you're a master of
Yeah,
creating the safe container,
yeah.
in which then you can have very rough conversations and very direct. Um, so, for instance, one of the examples I'd like to use, if in the context of meetings, if someone um, in the corporate world, they love to do that, they just invite everyone to a meeting.
Right.
And then they wonder why nobody asks a question.
Hmm.
And the thing is, if I don't know why I'm in this meeting in the first place,
Yeah.
so why are we meeting? Why are we talking about that? I don't have a question because my question would be, why the fuck are we talking about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, um, so if I don't know why I'm there, and that's what I mean with the exclusivity in a group, the group needs to be exclusive. And then within this group, everyone can ask questions because they know what
We're
their
talking about
permissions and what
boundaries.
their roles are.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, a lot of politics comes down to boundary issues. For example, migration debates around boundary issues, sexuality debates, what's the boundaries of marriage or sexuality? A lot of things are boundary issues, and people either have too hard boundaries or too open boundaries. The sort of,
Mm.
Karl Popper, the open society, open borders, and then the opposite would be like too rigid. Like you have to be Catholic, straight, white, male, or something like this to be a human being, and like overly rigid. So that's essentially what we're talking about here is a boundaried space for whether it's training or facilitation. Like, hey, you have to be a robust adult to be here, but we're going to have permission. If you don't want to do any exercises, you can take a rest. This is what I say all the time, right? Like
Yeah.
people have like a genuine opt-out in my trainings. If they want to rest, they can just sit on the side. Like sometimes you say, if you're going to leave, tell a trainer so we know you're okay. But there's like clear, and I always make sure I really reinforce that. So it's like, oh, we did a lifeboat exercise in Zagreb where people had to make a case for their life and then vote other people out of the lifeboat and feed them to the sharks. And you basically, it's a meaning of life exercise. You basically had 1 minute to say why you should get to live, and then everyone else in the lifeboat had to kill you if they didn't like your reason. And one person chose, like, they're like, hey, you know what? I'm not going to do this exercise. I was like, great, come back in 45 minutes. Another person said, hey, can I just watch? I was like, yep, sure, no problem. And I was also really clear of like, hey, this could be upsetting. If you've had a recent death in your family, you might not want to do this.
Mm.
This is going to be tough, particularly if you're the first to be voted out of the lifeboat. It's pretty full on. I did it after 1 day, so I kind of knew the group a little bit and had a sense of people. Okay, we had someone to take care of the people who were voted out in case they were upset. One person was pretty upset that they got killed by their friends. It's like you might not want to be in a boat with your wife, so you two might want to be in two different groups. So there's
Oh,
like a
yeah.
lot of care to do something quite
Yeah.
intense, right? But to me, that's all boundaries. It's not that I'm making a safe space. I mean, it was
Mm.
incredibly upsetting for a couple of people, but
And
it
for
was
me,
also
that's
incredibly insightful.
the very pure definition. Let's call it brave space. Let's call it permission space, respectful space. Um, that's for me exactly that. That nobody takes it personal. Nobody feels offended.
Yeah,
Um,
that was one of the conditions. It's like you don't get to take it personally if people vote you out of the lifeboat,
and
and
and it's funny because you cannot. It's not that you can. It's not a switch that you can turn on and
right,
off.
an
Either
intent.
you feel offended or you don't. It's not if Mark tells me not to feel offended that I stop feeling offended,
Well,
right?
offended isn't a feeling. This is a mistake that a whole generation has made, right? So offense isn't a feeling. So anger is the emotional
Mm,
response, or irritation, or something like this, right? Offense is disguising the moral judgment of wrongness and
mm.
combining it with that feeling. So it doesn't actually mean anything in embodiment terms or linguistic terms, even to say you're offended. It just means I'm having a feeling and you're wrong. It's a
And
combination of two things.
and you make someone else responsible for that feeling.
Exactly.
And I think, and maybe now we're getting there. So I think in a safe space, we can own our feelings without making someone else responsible. All this, I feel disrespected, I feel offended, I feel dismissed. All of these are secondary emotions. They're not really emotions, right?
Yeah,
They're
they're
just judgments.
accusations. They're accusations. Like, I
Yes,
feel like you're making this not a safe space. I've heard that's
exactly.
just an accusation. Like,
Exactly.
I'm offended is an accusation in the form of
Yeah.
a feeling,
Yeah.
right? So it's disguising one's legitimate subjective emotional responses, which are valid, from accusations of
Yeah.
behavior and moral judgments, which may or may not be valid.
Yeah. So in order to have the space where everything is possible, I call it safe space, then you have to trust that everyone in the space is respecting you as a human and your dignity so that they do respect you.
Respect's such a difficult one. I used to work with like street kids and gangs and stuff, and they'd always be like,
Mm,
"Hey, you don't respect me." And it's a very big concept amongst certain groups, particularly quite violent groups actually,
mm,
and particular sort of stage development and spiral dynamics like red meme kind of
mm,
and respect. It's very difficult because it often means you have to say certain words Like you have to use my pronouns or you don't respect me. I'm like,
Mm,
no, I don't. Like I'm not gonna. I don't have to use your adjectives either, right? Like you have to call me beautiful, Mark.
yeah.
You know?
And it's and I find this very interesting because respect is something very personal. Again, you cannot force me to
Yeah,
respect you
yeah.
as much as you want, pointing a gun
I
at
do
me.
respect you, but you can't force me
You cannot force
to.
it. And then telling that someone has to respect you or is not respecting you if they're not doing certain things um, basically boils down to expressing your preferences. And that's when I teach psychological safety, that's the first thing that I would express. We have to make it explicit what our preferences are and what our trigger points is. So when do we feel disrespected?
Okay, so I would, yeah, I would prefer you talk to me in a particular way, or I prefer you didn't interrupt me, or
Yeah,
I would prefer you bow down and kiss my toes when you talk to me. Like, I mean, people
exactly.
have preferences, right?
Because, yeah, and because on the flip side, I might flip, I might feel triggered, right? If you don't look me in the eyes, I instinctively have the impression you don't respect me. I know this is not true.
Someone else might find that aggressive to my,
Exactly. And others, exactly, others would find it disrespectful if you do look them in the eyes. So
but I
it's
don't
very
think
cultural, it's very
respecting,
personal.
Much rather call about like boundaries or ground rules or like since respect's very subjective and I think the key thing we probably agree here is not that it's a sort of primarily a feeling based thing,
Hmm.
right? Like I feel I don't think safety is a feeling, for example. Like I think safety is an assessment of threat that leads to feelings of fear or anxiety or aggression on top of that, perhaps.
Mm,
But and again, this is a mistaken identification of kind of polyvagal theory that Porges never said safety is a feeling. He said it's an unconscious assessment. And then a whole
mm,
generation started because if you read Shakespeare, for example, no one talks about the feeling of safety. And I don't believe there's been any new feelings in the human race in the last 10 years. I don't believe there's been newer feelings of old. I
good
think
point.
there's new words for old feelings, and
Yeah.
the feeling is anxiety or fear, right? It's very
Mm,
simple. So, but what it adds in is assess as an accusation. So if I say feel unsafe, I've done two things. I've talked about my feeling, fear, maybe aggression, but I've also made an accusation sort of in brackets, which is you are doing something unsafe, you are aggressive.
hmm
And I think, and that's got a kind of controlling element. It's like you have to stop. So I kind of wish people would stop using the word safety as an emotion. I didn't hear you do that, but that's part of
mm,
this conversation, I think.
yeah. I like how you put it, the unconscious assessment, because it is something very personal. And again, you cannot force someone to feel safe. You cannot when
Yeah.
I get, I would
This is a safe
walk out of
space.
the room if someone declares this is a safe space. I just get up and walk out. I'm like,
Miriam, just for the record, if I'm in a room, it's not a safe space. Okay, it was actually very interesting being in Zagreb because I was regularly in places where there was men who could easily beat me up, and that's
mm,
not a feeling I have very often in England or Holland. And it was like, oh, I am actually slightly less safe physically here because these really masculine, tough guys were there. But that brings maybe final point on safety before we move on. I think it's something degrading to actual safety because it's like if I use rape as a metaphor. I won't use rape as a metaphor because I find it really degrading to the actual act,
hmm
right? Like, if people are using it metaphorically. Um, and I get it, it's like poetic, whatever, but I think it's disrespectful to the actual
hmm
thing. Yeah.
yeah,
So I personally choose not to use that metaphor forever. My choice. But the same with safety, right? It's like having been around war zones, actual physical unsafety. I find the idea of someone being offended to be not really equipped. Like I had a call with a Ukrainian yesterday that was cancelled because they were under rocket attack. So we had to
mm,
cancel the call. Okay, it was a mentoring call. And she is unsafe physically. She had to go to a bomb shelter, so she couldn't take the mentoring call. So I find the equivalence of her and someone in Berlin who's mildly offended because I don't know the latest language policing that they've invented 2 minutes ago that I haven't even learned yet, right? Like I find the equivalence to be not just wrong, not just factually a bad equivalence, but also morally wrong, that equivalence.
but then so I, I get that, and two things cross my mind. One, there is a difference between physical safety and psychological safety.
Yeah.
And I think our brains have not progressed so much that we still feel the same. We might feel the same kind of physical response when we read an email as
You're
when a
right.
tiger is in front of us.
They're
So,
not equivalent, but they sort of are physiologically a
so
bit.
physiologically,
Yeah, yeah.
it is very similar. And then it's not that we cannot speak about hunger because they're actually people starving. We cannot make fun of, oh, I'm starving.
Well, I actually made that joke when I in Ethiopia because I hadn't had lunch. And I said to my
Oops,
friend, I'm starving. He said, my friend
don't
testified,
do that.
no, you're not. And I never said it again in Ethiopia because
Yeah.
he realized that there isn't an equivalence between being hungry and being
Yeah.
starving. Like
And I
that's like
think,
the rape or safety for me, that they're not equivalent, even if it's a similarity. I mean,
and
we're sort
now,
of both right here, right? Like the point you're making is valid.
and the more you know about the world and you know about the relativity of misery and the extremes, then suddenly the smaller becomes your vocabulary in terms of metaphors. So I think, yes, just because there's someone who suffers more, it is bad, and there is really capital T
Yeah.
trauma, doesn't mean that those who have small t trauma,
Yeah, I mean,
um,
yeah, it's still they're upset. They're
might still have permission.
right. It's like if someone's dog dies, they're genuinely sad.
Yeah.
Not the same as if their mum dies, maybe, but people have close relationships with their cat.
And sometimes they have closer relationships with their
Yeah,
dogs than with
sure.
their moms,
Hard
and
to
then they
separate.
might suffer more, and there might be real grief. And just because I've never had this relationship with a dog, I'm like, who am I to judge, right? It's easy to make fun, but I cannot.
Yeah, yeah.
So I
Maybe
think
it's my own
it's
bias as well.
difficult.
My own bias from my own personal experience makes it
Yeah,
hard for me to, get my violin out too much when it's
yeah,
psychological safety. But I
yeah,
think we've found some conversation here, which is good in our polarized world. This is why we may be a good team. I'd say Miriam as well. We
yeah,
bring
yeah.
different
And I think
angles
we are
to it.
onto something. I think we're not done with this conversation yet.
There's more there. There's more. I'm gonna right wing red pill you at some point, and you're gonna upset Amsterdam. You're gonna come in and say none of you are safe because Miriam's in the room. Okay, so what makes a great facilitator? Let's go there.
Mm. Someone who owns their shit, in someone who has done the inner work.
Their own therapeutic work, processing awareness work.
Not be their small t and capital T trauma, because I think as soon, and that's similar with coaching, but if you do one-on-one coaching, there's only one potential trigger in the room. If you're
Okay.
facilitating a group, you have an entire room full of people, and there will
Yes.
always be the person who reminds you of your mom, and the person who reminds you of your dad, and the high school teacher, and every behavior can potentially get us off track.
I mean, that's why I try and offend everyone equally, Miriam. I always say if I don't make a xenophobic joke about your country, let me know. Because if there's someone from Luxembourg there, maybe my racism is not like on point for Luxembourg. I haven't got the jokes. I have to look it up in the break to make sure everyone's equally
I can
upset.
give you
That's the
some.
solution.
I lived in Luxembourg for 3 years, so I tell you that.
Well,
Can
yeah,
help you
what's
with
what's
jokes
the
about.
joke? Is it like Germany took like 13 hours to conquer their country in World War II or something? Like there's probably a Luxembourg joke around somewhere. Nice
Well,
country, actually. I taught there. It's very pleasant.
yeah, you don't want to live there, but otherwise it's great.
Pleasant. Nice place. No.
Anyway, different topic.
Okay.
That's my small T
Shout out
trauma.
to our one Luxembourg listener.
Um, no, Luxembourgers are great. Um, so yeah, so the inner work, I think is the most important, because we come in with a process. We have to believe in our process, and we have to, because if we don't believe in it, the group won't. And the worst that can happen is like, why are we doing this? No, I don't want to. And I think to convey this confidence, it's important. Um, and authenticity, another big word, um, by which I mean not trying to impress anyone, or not pretending to be funny if we're not funny, not trying to be liked. Because I think if we are compromising our own authenticity, it
Yes.
basically, what it shows to the group is it's not okay for them to be authentic. Um,
Yeah, that's an interesting one because I guess there's also professionalism and I'm here to do a job. I could be authentic about being, I don't know, someone comes in hungover. Do I want to be authentic about
mm.
I'm in a bad mood because I had an argument with my girlfriend that morning? I mean, I don't know. Authenticity is overrated, I think, but
I don't think that
I don't know.
authentic means um,
Oversharing.
oversharing, and for me, that's immaturity.
Uh-huh. But it also means
If you
being able
come
to
hang
manage your
over and
moods.
share everything, that's immature.
Being able to manage your moods is also important, right? Like I might be in a not great mood, but there's a fine line between authenticity and simultaneously going, hey, I'm not here to give everyone else a shitty mood.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And so we've got sort of owning your own stuff, authenticity, but with
Hmm.
boundaries. Um, I guess on the embodiment front, like what do you want to add there? I mean, you've done some embodied work with me, you're aware of the field.
Mm.
What embodied skills do facilitators need?
Mm. So I think the first one would be the grounding, and that might be the equivalent with owning your stuff, so that the first thing doesn't get you off, doesn't unroot you immediately, doesn't knock you off. If there's a question of something, I think facilitator has to be flexible and nimble because
Mhm.
you come up with a plan and it never works out as
Right,
planned.
right. There's always not enough time for the content and something happens and yeah.
Exactly. Or you walk in the room and you realize that actually what they need is something totally different.
Oh, that's happened to me
They
a bunch
called
of
you for
times.
strategy,
Yeah.
but actually what they need is a bit of team building.
Right. Or there wasn't really could buy-in for people there, or someone's boss is there, so they're not going to speak, and someone's
Exactly.
wife is by the way, the most famous thing I've ever done was called the Real Organizational Chart. It's been shared in three TED
Oh,
Talks.
yes, I remember that one.
And it's often not credited to me. I just sketched it out, and a designer made it for me in like 5 minutes, like 15 years ago. And there's all this sort of links between the different people on
He
there.
sleeps with her and they golf together
You've
and
seen
they.
it, right? It's been used all around the world. It's totally bizarre that this is the most famous thing I've ever done. People don't always know it was mine. I don't mind, but it's kind of fun.
I
Okay,
did
but
not know that it was yours.
yeah, I invented that. The real organizational chart. We might see like integration training at the bottom, which is my kind of corporate brand from years ago. But yeah, that was a 2 minute sketch on a napkin that I sent to a guy who made it in 5 minutes on a
That is
as a
so
design.
funny.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so other embodiment skills, I guess, like inspiring people, and then the co-regulatory skills, right? Like talking about all this safety, a lot of it, like the challenge I did to that person about childlike behavior, a lot of that comes from that because people can say the right words, like, I respect everyone and I speak to
Mm.
them, I'm inclusive, and actually they're hostile as shit. Like a
Yeah.
lot of the activists I know, they're just
Mm.
bristling hate and aggression,
Mhm.
and it's like being in a room with them is tough, no
Yeah.
matter what language they use.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and that's you know more about that stuff than I do. I think I'm sensitive that I can feel it. Um, and then I think it's difficult to really get to the root cause of it or to unlearn it or
Yeah.
to learn the self-awareness maybe. I think that's
Mm.
the other thing is I think body posture, how open or closed are you? So are you really interested or just pretending? So I find it very interesting what you have to
Yeah,
share.
okay. Like for people who aren't watching YouTube, it's like she's got arms crossed, leaning back, head tilted at a certain
Uh,
angle. So if we're facilitating, there's definitely like a
yeah,
curiosity of embodiment
yeah.
that's needed, right? An openness.
What I often see, and that's for online facilitation or training, if someone is staring directly into the camera and tries to connect because they're looking into the
Uh-huh.
camera, but they're so stiff and it's almost in your face, that also it creates an atmosphere that doesn't feel very inviting.
A bit intense. It's a bit like a Swiss German staring at you too much. It's yeah. And online, do you find it hard to kind of read the room? Because I guess that's another key facilitation skill. I think I've become relatively good at this in thousands of hours of training. Is sort of getting the embodied sense of the room. It's because it's an embodied skill, right? It's empathy, but it's also
Yeah.
like even with my jokes, right? Like, I mean, I'm being silly a lot of the time, but sometimes I'm like, you know what, this isn't landing. I need to cut this back. This audience is just too offended. It's just not going to help anyone. It's just not useful. And I can feel that in the room. Or
Mm.
yesterday, it was a couple of days ago, I was teaching. I was like, okay, they're just exhausted. We're supposed to have lunch at 1. Let's have lunch at 12:30. Like, there's a
Hmm.
classic. Like, these guys are just full. Like
Hmm.
cognitively, emotionally, they're
Yeah.
cooked, they're baked. There's lots of metaphors, right? And that's the felt sense. And it's a little harder on Zoom. You can do it on Zoom, right? But a little harder.
Yeah, I think it's I work 99% on Zoom now.
Okay.
And I think I've become very good at even listening to the silence. the
Right.
different sounds of silence, right? There's the silence that is confused, the silence that is thinking, feeling, the silence that is shocked.
Gasping.
Did she really just say that? Um, and I think by now I became very good in sensing what's going on just
Yeah.
by how people are behind the camera. Um, so I stopped asking people to turn the camera on. I invite them. I said, if you'd like to, it would help. And I think it's better for you because if the camera is off, nobody's watching. And then I can imagine that you're opening all the other tabs.
Yeah, tempted to start checking your email. And I've thrown people out of calls for obviously checking their phones and emails during sessions before. I don't tolerate that. That's a boundary for me. But it's tricky because I know for school teachers, for example, during COVID, they really struggled to get the kids to turn their cameras on.
And I
The-
would be, so the phone, I revised my judgment of using phone. I would be curious of your assessment. So I used to be like, okay, if someone is checking their phone, it shows that they are not interested, they're zoning out and whatever. Um, and then realized that the phone is actually more of a pacifier.
Yeah,
So if
like,
I say something and they feel uncomfortable, then the safety of the phone, that it's control, it's my home base, and then they grab it, it's automatically just to calm down their nervous system.
yeah, it's a regulatory thing for some people. For me, that's like showing a level of lack of robustness that I wouldn't be that interested in. I did notice even like 10 years ago in corporates, it was incredibly difficult to get people to keep their phones off,
Mm,
during the training, even for an hour. And then
mm,
so there's definitely times when I went, you know what, this is just too hard or it's too countercultural to this organization to keep your phones off. But for me, like attention is a prerequisite for learning,
mhm,
right? So I don't believe people can be giving enough attention if they're responding to. I mean, I was in an AA meeting, a 12-step meeting the other day where multiple people were checking their phones while someone was sharing about their alcohol addiction. And I was, I was a guest there, so I didn't say anything. But I was like, if that was my home group, I would say, okay, let's have what's called a group conscience around this, where you make a vote it's kind of, everything's done by vote in AA. But that to me was like, that's not appropriate for people sharing their,
yeah, and
activity
it's
stories.
funny, and then we're back at the safety, right? How safe does it feel if you're sharing your progress or your struggles and people are obviously not interested?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I wouldn't call that safety, but to me, that's a sign of disrespect right there. But again, it's like you're
Then we're
right. There's
back to
also
square one.
pacifying for people who are dysregulated in their phone. I remember
Yeah.
I was teaching in Sierra Leone, and it was obviously like a trauma safety thing to check your phone. The Ukrainians will check it for like air alarms, and they'll
Mhm.
check it for family members being safe and this kind of
Yeah.
thing. So I go, okay, that's pretty good reason. You know what I mean? Like this is
Yeah.
it's tricky. It's tricky.
Yeah.
Listen, there's lots here, and I'm glad we could geek out about it. I felt like we found some common ground and also some difference, which is healthy, I think. I'm looking forward to your guest sessions. You're going to be doing some masterclasses for us at the Flourishing Facilitators, right? Like you've got some
Yes.
masterclasses on some of these topics.
Yes, I think pretty much all of them and a bit more. So, how to design actually a process that is engaging, how to deal with the participants who seem difficult, although
Yeah,
difficult is just our
difficult's one of
judgment.
those words, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
one of
the
those
loud
words.
ones, the silent ones, how to get them and how to increase or decrease the energy in the room so that we don't have to work that hard as facilitators. Yeah, so all these kind of things. And then masterclass, I would put it in air quotes. I'm a facilitator by heart, so there will be breakouts. There will be lots of
You will,
conversation.
oh,
There's a
you
lot of knowledge
gentlemen,
in the room already.
dictatorial expertise. We will have ways of making you teach them. Okay, so yeah, so facilitating, good balance for me. Good. So if people want to find that, go to embodimentunlimited.com or they can email us to find the Flourishing Facilitators. And Myriam, where do they go to find your podcast and your work in general?
Um, I think the best is LinkedIn.
Okay.
The podcast is until the end of 2025, it's workshops work, and from 2026, it will be unprofessionalism.
Okay. Yeah, workshops.work, and it's moving to unprofessionalism.
Yeah.
At the moment, it says, "Are your training programs missing the mark?" with a
So
capital M.
workshops.work is my company. So I have an agency. We deliver corporate training in up to 20 languages to multinational companies.
Wow, that's I know you're not Dutch, but that's very Dutch. That's super cool, super international. Good. Final word on facilitation before we close.
Do the work and stay real. Don't try to be professional.
I try to be professional.
Don't try to be professional.
Just because I'm curious, before we go, why unprofessionalism? Just a few sentences on that before we wrap up.
It's a provocation. I could have called it post-professionalism.
Okay.
I have the impression
Voting.
that professionalism nowadays is more of a mask that we wear
Yes.
to pretend that we have it all together and that we are so professional. We forget about being human.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah, it's exactly what we discussed at the very beginning. In a world where AI has more expertise than many, more knowledge, what does it actually mean to be a professional?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Myriam, Dankeschön. Thank you, Val. Lovely to meet you again. Lovely to see you. And I will see you at Facilitators Flourishing.
Thank you.